My daughter said, "Don't dare show up for Christmas. My husband doesn't want to see you." I nodded. On the morning of December 25th, they found out that the rent of their house, which I'd been paying for 3 years, was canceled. I'm glad you're here with me. Please like this video and listen to my story till the end, and let me know which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. For 3 years, I had been paying rent for my daughter Sarah's house, $1,800 a month like clockwork. Every first of the month, I transferred the money without hesitation. Sarah was my only child, and her husband Derek had convinced her they needed a bigger place when their second baby arrived. I wanted to help. What grandmother wouldn't? I lived alone in Phoenix in the modest 2-bedroom house my late husband and I had bought 30 years ago. My retirement wasn't lavish, but it was enough. Enough for me and enough to help my daughter's family, or so I believed. I thought I was building bridges. I thought I was securing my place in their lives, in my grandchildren's memories. The first warning sign came in September. I had called to ask about little Emma's birthday party. Sarah's voice turned cold. "Mom, we're keeping it small this year, just close friends. Close friends, but not me." I swallowed the herd and sent a generous check anyway. The thank you text I received was 3 words long. Got it. Thanks. By October, my weekly phone calls went increasingly to voicemail. When Sarah did answer, conversations lasted barely 5 minutes. "I'm busy, Mom. The kids are crazy today. Can I call you back?" She never did. I told myself she was overwhelmed that young mothers needed space. I had been young once, too. I understood, didn't I? November brought Thanksgiving plans, or the lack thereof. "We're doing Thanksgiving with Derek's family this year," Sarah informed me on a rushed Tuesday afternoon call. "His mom is getting older, and we want to spend time with her while we can." The irony wasn't lost on me. Derek's mother was 62. I was 67. But I smiled through the phone, wished them well, and ate turkey alone, while watching football games I didn't care about. The rental payment still went through on November 1st. And December 1st, like clockwork. Then came December 15th. I had been planning my Christmas visit for weeks. Bought presents for Emma and baby Jackson, wrapped them in shiny paper with elaborate bows. I had knitted a blanket for Sarah, spending evenings in front of the television, every stitch infused with love and hope. Maybe Christmas would reset everything. Maybe I had been imagining the distance. I called to confirm my arrival date. Sarah answered on the 6th ring, her voice strained and distant. Background noise suggested she was in a car. "Mom, about Christmas. I'll arrive on the 23rd. I interrupted cheerfully, trying to fill the silence with enthusiasm. "That gives me 2 full days with the kids before the big day. I can help you cook, watch the children, whatever you need." "That's the thing, Mom." A pause. A long, deliberate pause that made my stomach drop. "We need to talk." Those 4 words. Has anything good ever followed them? Derek and I have discussed it, and we think it's better if you don't come this year. We need time as our own family unit. Derek's been stressed with work and having guests. Even family would just be too much right now. Guests. She called me a guest. Sarah, sweetheart. "I'm not a guest. I'm your mother. I'm their grandmother." My voice cracked despite my efforts to sound reasonable. "I know, Mom, but Derek really doesn't want." She stopped herself, but the damage was done. Derek doesn't want what something hard formed in my chest. A cold crystallization of 3 years of suspicions I had been too afraid to acknowledge. Her voice turned sharp, defensive. "Look, I have to go. I'm driving. But the decision is made. Don't come for Christmas. Derek doesn't want to see you. And honestly, I need to support my husband." The line went dead. I stood in my kitchen phone, still pressed to my ear, listening to silence. The Christmas tree I had already decorated blinked cheerfully in the corner. Presents sat beneath it, tagged with names of people who didn't want me around. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, watching car headlights sweep across the walls. Questions circled like vultures. When had I become unwelcome? What had I done wrong? And more importantly, what had I been funding all this time? On Christmas morning, while Sarah and Derek and my grandchildren opened presents I would never see them enjoy, I made a phone call to the property management company that handled their rental house, the house whose lease was in my name, the house I had been paying for month after month for 3 years. I'd like to cancel the lease agreement, I said, calmly, effective immediately. After I hung up with the property management company, my hands trembled. What had I just done? I sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd written $64,800 in rent checks over 3 years. $64,800. The number carved itself into my brain. I pulled out my financial records, spreading them across the table like evidence at a crime scene. Bank statements, transfer receipts, credit card bills for gifts I'd sent, plane tickets for visits that had grown increasingly awkward. The total climbed higher, $73,000 over 3 years, nearly 75. When I factored in Christmas and birthday presents, the stroller I'd bought, the crib, the car seat, the endless stream of little things Sarah had mentioned needing. My retirement account had shrunk by almost 30%. I had delayed necessary home repairs. My car was 9 years old and making concerning noises. I wore the same winter coat I'd owned for 15 years, all while Sarah posted photos on Facebook of her decorative throw pillows and weekend trips to wine country. How had I been so blind? The fear hit me around noon. The property manager had been professional but firm. 30-day notice required lease termination processed. They would inform the tenants by end of business day. Sarah would know by evening. My phone sat on the table like a bomb waiting to detonate. What would she say? What would Derek do? I imagined Derek's face, the way his jaw clenched when he was angry. I'd seen it before directed at waiters, at customer service representatives, at anyone he deemed beneath him. Soon it would be directed at me. Part of me wanted to call back, cancel the cancellation, apologize, pretend it had been a mistake. But then I looked again at those numbers. $75,000. 3 years of being pushed further and further away. Derek doesn't want to see you. My daughter's voice echoed in my memory, flat and dismissive. No more. I made coffee, strong and black, and sat down with a notepad. If I was doing this, I needed to think clearly. I needed a plan, not just an emotional reaction. Derek was a corporate lawyer, arrogant and manipulative, but not stupid. Sarah had always been easily influenced, even as a child. Together, they would fight back, and I needed to be ready. First, I documented everything. I created a spreadsheet with every payment I'd made, rent, gifts, emergency funds I'd wired when Derek's bonus was delayed. I scanned receipts, downloaded bank statements, organized them in a folder labeled simply Sarah Financial Support 2022 to 2024. Then I reviewed the lease agreement. I had signed it at Sarah's request 3 years ago when their credit wasn't good enough to qualify for the house they wanted. Just as a co-signer, Mom Sarah had promised, "We'll take over the lease in a year." That never happened. The lease had renewed twice in my name alone with me as the sole financially responsible party. They weren't even on the paperwork. Legally, the house was mine to cancel. Ethically, that was the question that gnawed at me. Was I being cruel? Was I punishing my daughter for setting boundaries? But these weren't boundaries. Boundaries would be, "Mom, we need Christmas morning, just us, but please come for dinner." Boundaries would be, "Can we do every other Thanksgiving?" This was exile. This was using me for money while erasing me from their lives. By 3 in the afternoon, I had a plan. Simple, clear, unshakable. I would stop funding their lifestyle. The lease cancellation was step 1. Step 2 would be cutting off all financial support. No more emergency transfers, no more generous birthday checks, no more Amazon packages arriving at their door because Sarah had mentioned something in passing. I would not be cruel. I would not badmouth them or turn vindictive. I would simply stop paying. They were adults. Derek with his law degree, Sarah with her part-time marketing job. They could support themselves. They would have to. My phone buzzed at 4:47 p.m. A text from Sarah, all capital letters. What did you do? Another buzz. Call me now. Another. Mom, this is insane. You can't do this to us. I turned my phone face down and finished my coffee. The fear was still there, sitting heavy in my chest, but something else was growing alongside it. Resolve. For 3 years, I had made myself small, hoping to earn love through generosity. I had confused being needed with being wanted. That ended today. Tomorrow, I would call my own lawyer. I called Margaret Chen's office at 9:00 a.m. on December 26th. Margaret had handled my husband's estate after he passed, and I trusted her. Her secretary seemed surprised anyone was working the day after Christmas, but Margaret herself called back within an hour. Linda. What's going on? Her voice was warm, but professional. I explained everything. The 3 years of payments, the gradual distancing, the Christmas exclusion, the lease cancellation. As I spoke, the story sounded even worse out loud. Margaret listened without interrupting the occasional meme confirming she was still there. Do you have documentation? She asked when I finished. Everything. Every payment, every text message, every receipt. Good. Email me the files today. We'll schedule a meeting after New Year's. But Linda, she paused. Are you prepared for this to get ugly? Family law situations often do, especially when adult children feel entitled to parental support. I'm prepared, I said though. My voice wavered slightly. I need to know where I stand legally. Can they sue me for stopping support? Not successfully, but they can try. What concerns me more is the potential for harassment manipulation or using the grandchildren as leverage. Margaret's tone turned serious. I've seen it before. Adult children who've become dependent on parental funds can become creative when that support ends. Her words proved prophetic by that evening. My phone had been buzzing intermittently all day. Calls from Sarah, texts from Derek, voicemails I hadn't listened to. I had spent the day organizing documents, emailing files to Margaret, and researching tenant rights in California where Sarah and Derek lived. The lease termination was legal and proper, 30 days notice. Everything by the book. At 7:00 p.m., my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Through the peephole, I saw Derek's face red and twisted with anger. Sarah stood behind him, arms crossed, eyes swollen from crying. They had driven 6 hours from California to Arizona to my home unannounced. My hand hovered over the doorknob. Everything in me wanted to hide, pretend I wasn't home, wait until they left. But I had started this. I needed to finish it. I opened the door but kept the security chain engaged. Yes, we need to talk. Derek's voice was controlled but barely. Now it's late and you didn't call ahead. This isn't a good time. Not a good time. His voice rose. You're destroying our lives and it's not a good time. Sarah stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. Mom, please. The kids. What about Emma and Jackson? They'll have to change schools. You're punishing them because you're mad at us. The manipulation was so smooth, so practiced. Make it about the grandchildren. Make me the villain. The lease ends in 30 days. I said evenly. That gives you a month to find alternative housing. I'm not punishing anyone. I'm simply no longer funding your lifestyle. Lifestyle? Derek's laugh was sharp and bitter. We're barely getting by. Sarah doesn't work full-time because of the kids. We need that house. Then you should have thought of that before disinviting me from Christmas, before treating me like an ATM instead of family. That's what this is about. Sarah's voice turned shrill. You're throwing us out because we wanted one holiday to ourselves. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. When did she learn to lie so easily? This wasn't about one holiday. This was about 3 years of escalating disrespect, of being used and discarded. Sarah? I have texts going back months where you've ignored my calls, canceled visits, and treated me like an obligation. You took my money while cutting me out of your life. That ends now. Derek's hand slammed against the door frame, making me flinch. You spiteful old woman. We'll sue you for breach of contract, for emotional distress, for alienation of affection from the grandchildren. Derek. I met his eyes through the gap in the door. I spoke with my attorney today. The lease is in my name alone. You have no legal standing, and if you continue harassing me, that attorney will file for a restraining order. The words came out stronger than I felt. Inside, I was shaking, but I held his gaze. Sarah tried another tactic, her voice breaking. Mom, please. I'm sorry if we hurt your feelings, but this is extreme. We can talk about this like adults. Let us in. No. I stepped back. You have 30 days. I suggest you start looking for apartments. I closed the door. Through the wood, I heard Derek's furious curses, Sarah's sobbing pleas. They stood there for 20 minutes before finally leaving. Their rental car's engine echoed in the quiet street. I called Margaret Chen's emergency line. They came to my house, I said, my voice finally shaking now that I was alone. Derek threatened legal action. I need that restraining order. I'll file the paperwork tomorrow, Margaret said calmly. Linda, document everything. Every text, every call, every visit, everything. This is your point of no return. They know you're serious now. I looked at my phone. 17 missed calls, 23 text messages. It was only just beginning. Margaret filed the restraining order request on December 27th. By December 30th, I had a temporary protective order preventing Derek and Sarah from coming within 100 yards of my home or contacting me except through attorneys. The judge had reviewed my documentation, the threatening voicemails Derek left after their visit, the text messages that had devolved from pleading to accusatory to outright hostile. The photos of them sitting in a car outside my house at midnight, 2 days after I'd asked them to leave. You're essentially stalking your own mother, Margaret had stated dryly in court. Sarah had cried. Derek had looked murderous but stayed silent. Their attorney, a young man who seemed uncomfortable with the whole situation, had argued that this was a family misunderstanding, blown out of proportion. The judge hadn't agreed. 30-day temporary order court date set for February to determine if it should be extended. But the restraining order was just the legal framework. The real plan was simpler and more devastating. Complete financial cutoff. I called my bank and removed Sarah as the emergency contact on my accounts. A permission I'd granted years ago just in case something happened to me. I canceled the credit card I'd given her for emergencies only, a card whose statements revealed charges at Target, Starbucks, and wine shops. No emergencies, just convenience. I updated my will removing Sarah as executive and changing my beneficiaries to a charitable trust with a small stipulation that after my death, Emma and Jackson would receive educational funds, but only if managed by an independent trustee, not their parents. Margaret had suggested that last part, protect the grandchildren without enabling the parents she'd advised. On January 2nd, I received an email from a law firm in Los Angeles. Derek had hired a litigation specialist. The letter was full of legal language, but the message was clear. They were suing me for intentional infliction of emotional distress breach, of implied contract, and tortious interference with familial relationships. Margaret had laughed when I forwarded it to her. This is a pressure tactic. These claims are nonsense. You can't breach a contract that never existed. And supporting your adult child isn't a binding obligation. They're trying to scare you into restoring the money. Will they win? Not a chance. But they'll make noise, rack up legal fees they can't afford, and hopefully realize this is pointless. She paused. Linda, are you still sure about this? It's going to get worse before it gets better. I thought about Emma and Jackson, whom I hadn't seen since August. I thought about the grandmother I'd imagined being present at school, plays, baking cookies, teaching them to garden. Derek and Sarah had taken that future from me while taking my money. I'm sure the lawsuit was officially filed on January 8th. The same day, Sarah called from her mother-in-law's phone, circumventing the restraining order. Mom Derek's firm put him on probation because of the court case. This is ruining his career. Please just drop everything and we can forget this happened. We'll pay you back. How I asked quietly. You haven't paid rent in 3 years. You're suing me. How exactly will you pay me back? We'll work it out. But you have to stop this legal insanity. Derek says, I don't care what Derek says, Sarah. He's not my son. He's not my responsibility. And neither are you anymore. The silence on the line was deafening. You're choosing money over your daughter. Her voice dripped with disbelief and wounded pride. No, Sarah. You chose money over your mother 3 years ago. I'm just finally accepting that reality. She hung up. Within an hour, Derek called from an unknown number. You'll never see those kids again. He hissed before I could speak. Emma won't even remember you exist. You're dead to this family. I recorded the call. Margaret had set me up with an app for exactly this purpose. Another violation of the restraining order, more ammunition. But that night, alone in my house with the recorded threat still echoing in my mind, I broke down. I sat on my kitchen floor and sobbed for the daughter I'd lost, for the grandchildren being used as weapons for the 3 years I'd wasted, hoping love could be bought. I took the next 5 days off from everything. No emails, no legal documents, no phone calls except to Margaret's office for updates. I watched old movies, took long walks in the January desert cold, visited a friend in Tucson who listened without judgment. I needed to remember who I was before I became an ATM machine with a grandmother's face. By January 14th, I felt stronger, not happy, but resolved. And that's when they tried a different approach. The email arrived from Sarah's account on January 15th, but the tone was different. Soft, apologetic, almost childlike. Mom, I've been doing a lot of thinking. Derek and I both have. We realize we've handled this all wrong. You're right. We took you for granted. We treated you like an ATM instead of family. I'm so sorry. I want to fix this. I want you back in our lives and the kids' lives. Emma asked about you yesterday. She wanted to know when Grandma Linda was coming to visit. It broke my heart. Can we start over? No lawyers. No fighting, just family. I'll tell Derek to drop the lawsuit. We can work out a visitation schedule. Maybe you could come see the kids next month. They miss you so much. Please, Mom. I miss my mother. Love, Sarah. I read the email 3 times. Each time something felt wrong. The phrasing was too careful, too calculated. We can work out a visitation schedule, as if access to my grandchildren was a privilege to be negotiated, a carrot to dangle. I forwarded it to Margaret without responding. Her reply came within an hour. Classic manipulation. Notice she's offering access to the grandchildren, but making no mention of the money situation or accepting responsibility for the financial exploitation. She's trying to reset the relationship on her terms. Don't respond yet. Let's see if she follows through on dropping the lawsuit. Talk is cheap. I didn't respond to Sarah for 3 days' silence. I focused on rebuilding my own life, the life that had shrunk to fit around their needs. I called my friend Janet, whom I hadn't seen in months because I'd been too busy being available for Sarah's emergencies. We met for lunch. You look different, Janet said, studying me across the table at our favorite cafe. tired but clearer somehow. I told her everything. 3 years of financial support, the Christmas rejection, the canceled lease, the lawsuit, the restraining order. She listened, her expression shifting from shock to anger to something like vindication. I tried to tell you, she said finally. 2 years ago, remember when you canceled our weekend trip because Sarah needed money for Derek's mother's birthday gift? I said it felt like you were being used. I remember. I told you that you didn't understand how hard it is for young families, and you were wrong. Janet's voice was gentle but firm. Young families struggle. What Sarah and Derek did was exploitation. There's a difference. The validation felt like cool water on a burn. I hadn't realized how isolated I'd become, how much I'd been second-guessing my own perception. My lawyer says they'll probably escalate before they accept defeat. I said I'm scared they'll turn up at my door again or worse. Janet pulled out her phone. You're staying with me if you need to. My guest room is yours, and I'm introducing you to my book club. We meet Thursdays. You need people around you who aren't trying to drain you dry. That Thursday, I attended my first book club meeting in Janet's spacious living room. 8 women ranging from their 50s to early 70s, all sharp and funny and refreshingly direct. When Janet introduced me and mentioned I was going through some family legal issues, the floodgates opened. My son tried to guilt me into refinancing my house to pay for his divorce. One woman said, "My daughter didn't speak to me for a year because I wouldn't co-sign a loan for a car she couldn't afford," said another. "Setting boundaries with adult children is the hardest thing I've ever done," offered a third. "But the alternative is enabling them into permanent adolescence." These women understood. They'd been through similar battles, survived them, and come out stronger. Their stories weren't identical to mine, but the patterns were familiar. Adult children who mistook parental love for parental obligation, who confused support with endless subsidy. By the time I left Janet's house that night, something had shifted inside me. The cold resolve I'd been maintaining, the determination not to cave, solidified into something deeper. Not anger anymore, but clarity. Sarah called again 2 days later, this time from her own phone, violating the restraining order for the 3rd documented time. "Did you get my email?" Her voice was strained, desperate. "Mom, I meant everything I said. Please, we can fix this. Sarah, you're violating a court order by calling me. It's my mother. I can call my own mother." The entitlement in her voice was staggering. She could discard me, sue me, threaten me, but when she wanted something, suddenly the rules didn't apply. "The lawsuit," I said calmly as Derek dropped it. A pause. "He's considering it, but he needs to know you'll reinstate the lease first." There it was. The conditions, the negotiation, the same transactional relationship dressed up in apologies. The answer is no. Sarah to all of it. "I'll see you in court in February." I hung up and immediately forwarded the call log to Margaret. Another violation, another piece of evidence. They were getting desperate, which meant the next phase would be worse. They came on a Saturday afternoon in late January, 3 weeks before the court hearing. I saw them through my front window. Derek's car parked across the street. Sarah emerging with a foil code dish. Derek carrying what looked like flowers. They approached my door with careful, measured steps. Performers taking the stage. I had been expecting something like this. Margaret had warned me that desperation makes people creative. I activated my phone's video recording and set it on the living room bookshelf angled toward the door. The doorbell rang. I opened it with the security chain engaged. "You're violating the restraining order." "We're not here to cause trouble." Derek said, his voice unnaturally smooth. He held up the flowers. "Supermarket carnations, cheap and wilting. We're here to apologize. Really apologize." Sarah stepped forward, holding out the dish. "I made your favorite chicken casserole like you used to make for us. Mom, please, can we just talk 5 minutes?" The domesticity of it was almost funny. casserole and flowers, as if 3 years of exploitation and a month of legal warfare could be smoothed over with props from a reconciliation playbook. You have attorneys. Talk through them. Attorneys make everything worse, Derek said quickly. They escalate. We don't want that. You don't want that. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Think about Emma and Jackson. They need their grandmother. Don't punish them because Sarah and I made mistakes. There it was again. The grandchildren as leverage, as emotional blackmail. If you cared about Emma and Jackson, you wouldn't be using them as bargaining chips, I said evenly. Sarah's face crumpled. That's not fair. I'm trying to fix things. I admitted we were wrong. Her voice rose genuine emotion, finally breaking through the performance. What more do you want from me? I want you to stop lying. The words came out harder than I intended, but I didn't soften them. You're not here to apologize. You're here because the lawsuit is expensive. Your lease is almost up and you need me to bail you out again. Derek's smile vanished. We drove 2 hours to make peace with you and this is how you respond. You really are a selfish Derek. Sarah put a hand on his arm, but he shook her off. No, she needs to hear this. He stepped closer to the door, his face weening. You know what your problem is, Linda? You think money gives you control. You think you can manipulate us by cutting off support, force us to come crawling back. But we don't need you. Then why are you here? The question hung in the air. Derek's jaw clenched. Sarah looked away. For the kids, Derek said finally, but the words sounded hollow even to him. Because despite everything, Sarah still loves you. Because family should mean something. Family does mean something, I said quietly. It means not treating your mother like an ATM. It means not uninviting her from Christmas and then acting surprised when she stops paying your bills. Sarah's mask cracked completely. You want to know the truth, Mom, fine. Derek's firm cut his hours. We're drowning in debt. We can't afford a new place without a co-signer, and everyone we've asked has said no. We need that lease reinstated. We need you to drop the restraining order so we can negotiate like adults. Finally, the truth. And what do I get? I asked. Supervised visits with my grandchildren, permission to send gifts, access to your lives at your convenience. What else do you want? Derek's voice turned vicious. You want us to gravel, beg, admit that you're the one with all the power because you have the money. I want you to see me as a person, not a bank account. But that's never going to happen, is it? Sarah's face hardened. You're going to regret this when Emma asks why Grandma abandoned us. When Jackson doesn't even know who you are when you're old and alone and realize you chose pride over family. Get off my property. My voice cut through her rising hysteria. Now, before I call the police for another restraining order violation, Derek threw the flowers on the ground. You're making the biggest mistake of your life, old woman. We will bury you in court. We will take everything. Derek, let's go. Sarah grabbed his arm, pulling him back toward the car. She looked at me one last time, her face twisted with something between fury and desperation. This is your last chance, Mom. Your last chance. I closed the door and locked it, watched through the window as they argued beside their car. Derek gesticulating wildly, Sarah crying. Both of them trapped in the consequences of their own choices. My hands were shaking. My heart raced. Part of me, the mother part, the grandmother part, wanted to run after them, fix everything, make it all okay. But the stronger part, the part that had been growing since Christmas Day, stayed rooted in place. I picked up my phone and stopped the recording. Sent the video file to Margaret with a message. Another violation. They threatened me. I want this on record. Her response came immediately. Perfect. This makes our case even stronger. They're unraveling. Linda, hold steady. That night, I didn't cry. I sat with Janet and her husband over dinner, told them what happened. and felt their solid, uncomplicated support. The fear was still there. Fear of what Derek and Sarah might do next. Fear of losing my grandchildren forever. But it was tempered now with something fiercer. They had shown me their true faces finally completely without pretense, and I would not forget. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined, fluorescent lit and institutional. February 10th, or 00 a.m. Margaret sat beside me at the defendant's table, her briefcase open, documents organized in neat stacks. Across the aisle, Derek and Sarah sat with their attorney, a different one from before. Apparently, they'd fired the first when he'd advised them to drop the case. The new attorney was older, sharper, and looked deeply uncomfortable with his clients. Judge Patricia Winters entered, and we all stood. She was in her early 60s, silver-haired, with the expression of someone who'd seen every variety of family dysfunction and wasn't impressed by any of it. "This is a motion to dismiss," she announced, scanning the documents. "The plaintiffs are suing for intentional infliction of emotional distress, breach of implied contract, and tortious interference with familial relationships. The defendant has filed for dismissal on grounds that these claims have no legal merit." She looked up. "Counselor Rodriguez, you may proceed." Sarah and Derek's attorney stood. "Your Honor, my clients have suffered significant harm due to the defendant's actions." Mrs. Wilson abruptly terminated a 3-year housing arrangement, causing financial distress and emotional trauma. The defendant's actions were motivated by spite and designed to punish. Mr. Rodriguez, Judge Winters, interrupted. "I've reviewed the lease agreement. It's in the defendant's name alone. The plaintiff and her husband are not listed as tenants. How can terminating one's own lease constitute tortious interference?" Rodriguez stumbled. "The arrangement was understood by all parties to be long-term. My clients relied on this understanding. Did they pay rent?" A pause. "The defendant covered the rent as a gift to her daughter, so they paid nothing, had no legal claim to the property, and are now suing because the free housing ended." Judge Winters looked unimpressed. "Continue." Rodriguez pressed on, arguing emotional distress, arguing that I had weaponized my financial support, arguing that grandparents have obligations to facilitate relationships with grandchildren. It was a desperate performance, facts twisted into arguments that barely held together. Then Margaret stood. "Your Honor, may I present evidence?" She approached the bench with a thick folder. "These are bank records showing $75,000 in payments and gifts over 3 years. These are text messages showing the plaintiff systematically distancing the defendant while continuing to accept her money. This is documentation of 3 separate restraining order violations, including recorded threats." She placed a tablet on the judge's bench. "And this is video footage of the plaintiff's most recent visit, where they explicitly stated they needed the defendant to reinstate financial support." Judge Winters watched the video, her expression darkening. On the screen, Derek's voice rang clear. "We're drowning in debt. We need that lease reinstated." The judge looked up at Derek and Sarah. "You violated a restraining order to demand money." Sarah stood suddenly. "That's not, you're taking it out of context. She's my mother. I was trying to reconcile. Sit down, Mrs. Morrison." The judge's voice was ice. "No." Sarah's voice cracked. "You don't understand what she did. She kicked us out right before Christmas. She turned her back on her own grandchildren because we wanted one holiday to ourselves. She's vindictive and cruel, and she's using her money to control. Mrs. Morrison, sit down now, or I'll hold you in contempt." Derek grabbed Sarah's arm, pulling her back into her seat. She was crying now, loud and messy, all the composed performance shattered. Judge Winters turned to me. "Mrs. Wilson, did you promise to pay your daughter's rent indefinitely?" "No, Your Honor." My voice was steady, calmer than I felt. "I helped with their housing when they asked, but there was never a long-term agreement." When they excluded me from their lives while continuing to accept my money, I decided to stop enabling that dynamic. Did you prevent them from seeing their children? No, Your Honor. I asked for visitation but was willing to work through proper channels. They're the ones who threatened that I would never see my grandchildren again. The judge reviewed more documents. The courtroom's silent except for Sarah's stifled sobs. Finally, Judge Winters spoke. Motion to dismiss granted. All claims are dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, I'm extending the restraining order for 1 year and ordering the plaintiffs to pay the defendants' legal fees. She looked at Derek and Sarah. You exploited your mother financially, then sued her when she stopped paying. This is one of the more transparent attempts at manipulation I've seen. You should be ashamed. Derek's face was purple with rage. This is prejudice. You didn't even listen. One more word, Mr. Morrison, and you'll join your wife in contempt proceedings. Judge Winters banged her gavel. This court is adjourned. Margaret squeezed my hand. You won, Linda. Completely. I watched Derek and Sarah storm out their attorney, hurrying after them with a resigned expression. Rodriguez would probably fire them as clients within the week. I had won, but why did it still hurt? The legal fees ruling came through 3 days after the court hearing. $12,400. Derek and Sarah had 30 days to pay or face wage garnishment. Their attorney formally withdrew from their case the same afternoon, citing irreconcilable differences with clients. Legal speak for they're impossible to work with. Margaret called with an update a week later. They filed for bankruptcy. I was in my garden pruning roses in the February sunshine. What Chapter 7? Liquidating everything. The lawsuit costs broke them, and apparently Derek lost his job. His firm doesn't keep associates who generate negative publicity. Sarah's trying to work full-time, but daycare for 2 kids is eating whatever she makes. Margaret's tone was neutral professional. They're moving into Derek's mother's basement in Oregon. Signed a lease for it last week. Oregon, 2 states away, even farther than California had been. What about the legal fees they owe me discharged in bankruptcy? You won't see that money. She paused. I know that's not what you want to hear, but Linda, you didn't do this for the money. You did it to stop being exploited. That goal succeeded. She was right. The $12,000 was pennies compared to the $75,000 I'd already spent. This had never been about recovering funds. It was about recovering dignity. But the next part surprised me. Margaret continued. There's something else. Sarah's mother-in-law called my office. She wants to facilitate supervised visits between you and the children. Says Derek and Sarah are too unstable right now, and she thinks Emma especially needs grandmother figures in her life. Derek's mother wants to help me. Apparently she's not a fan of her son's behavior. She used the word appalled several times. 2 weeks later, I received a formal letter from Patricia Morrison, Derek's mother, written in careful cursive on cream stationery. Dear Linda, I owe you an apology, though I'm sure you don't want to hear from any Morrison ever again. I've known for some time that my son and your daughter were taking advantage of you. I said nothing, and that was cowardice. I told myself it wasn't my business. They're living in my basement now with the children. It's crowded and tense. Derek is bitter and unemployed. Sarah is exhausted. But the children shouldn't pay for their parents' failures. If you're willing, I would like to arrange video calls between you and Emma and Jackson. Perhaps when things settle, in-person visits. No pressure, no manipulation, just a grandmother's attempt to do right by children who deserve better. Respectfully, Patricia Morrison. I called her the next day. Patricia answered on the first ring, her voice warm but cautious. We talked for an hour. She told me Derek had always been entitled, that she'd tried to teach him accountability, but his father had spoiled him. She told me Sarah seemed broken, depleted, a shell of the person she'd been 3 years ago. They destroyed themselves, Patricia said quietly. and they're trying to destroy each other now. I hear them fighting at night. Derek blames Sarah for pushing you away. Sarah blames Derek for the lawsuit. Neither of them takes responsibility and the children. Emma asks about you sometimes. She remembers baking cookies with Grandma Linda. She's confused about why you disappeared. Patricia's voice cracked slightly. I told her sometimes adults make mistakes and relationships need time to heal. But Linda, she's 6 years old. She shouldn't have to understand these things. We arranged a video call for the following Saturday. Patricia would supervise making sure Derek and Sarah stayed out of frame and kept quiet. I spent the week preparing baked cookies, even though Emma couldn't eat them through a screen. Bought a new shirt, practiced what I'd say. When Emma's face appeared on my laptop screen, something in my chest loosened. She'd grown lost a tooth hair longer still, those same bright eyes. Grandma, her face lit up. Where have you been? I've been here, sweetheart. I've missed you so much. We talked about school, about her drawings, about the new friend she'd made. She showed me a stuffed elephant she'd gotten for Christmas from Patricia, since Sarah and Derek apparently couldn't afford gifts. Baby Jackson appeared briefly, toddling into frame, not recognizing me but waving anyway. After 30 minutes, Patricia gently ended the call. Same time next week. She asked me off camera. Yes, please. That night, I finally felt something other than vindication or resolve. I felt hope not for reconciliation with Sarah and Derek. That bridge was ash, but for connection with Emma and Jackson. Patricia was giving me what their parents had stolen. Access to my grandchildren on terms that didn't require me to fund anyone's lifestyle or tolerate anyone's abuse. Derek and Sarah's defeat was complete. Bankruptcy, unemployment, forced to live in Derek's mother's basement, their relationship deteriorating under the weight of consequences they'd built themselves. No money, no house, no legal recourse. And now Derek's own mother had sided with me. I didn't celebrate their suffering, but I didn't mourn it either. They'd made their choices. These were the results. By April, my life had transformed in ways I hadn't imagined possible. The money I'd been spending on Sarah's rent, $800 monthly now, went toward things I'd been postponing for years. I fixed my car's transmission, replaced my aging water heater, booked a trip to visit my sister in Vermont for her 70th birthday. Small things, but they felt revolutionary. Janet and I became inseparable. Book club expanded into weekly dinners, spontaneous day trips to Sedona, early morning hikes. She introduced me to her spin class. I lasted 15 minutes the first time, but worked up to 30 by month 2. I was rediscovering energy I'd forgotten I had. You look 10 years younger, Janet said one Saturday as we browsed a farmer's market. Seriously, Linda, whatever face cream you're using, I need some. It's called not being financially drained by ungrateful relatives, I said, and we both laughed. The video calls with Emma and Jackson became the highlight of my weeks. Patricia kept her word. Every Saturday at 10:00 a.m., the kids would appear on screen, increasingly comfortable with our new routine. Emma showed me school projects. I read them stories. Jackson, now talking in full sentences, called me Gamma Yinda. Patricia sometimes joined the calls, and we discovered we had much in common. Both widows, both lovers of gardening, both disappointed in our children, but determined to love our grandchildren anyway. In May, Patricia invited me to visit Oregon for Emma's 7th birthday. Small party, just family. She said carefully, Derek and Sarah won't be there. I'm sending them to his brother's house for the weekend. Emma doesn't know you're coming. It's a surprise. I flew to Portland with a suitcase full of gifts and my heart in my throat. Emma's face when she saw me, pure, unfiltered joy, made every moment of the past 5 months worth it. Grandma Linda, you came. You really came. She launched herself at me and I held her tight, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo, feeling her small arms around my neck. We spent a perfect weekend, baked cookies, played board games. Patricia took us to the zoo where Jackson was terrified of the lions, but loved the penguins. At night, after the kids were asleep, Patricia and I sat on her back porch drinking wine. "How are they doing?" I asked, meaning Derek and Sarah. "Really?" Patricia sighed. Derek's working at a furniture warehouse loading trucks. His ego's destroyed. He comes home angry every night. Sarah's managing a coffee shop, but her hours are unpredictable. They fight constantly. Money, mostly. Whose fault everything is. Do they ask about the calls with Emma and Jackson? Sarah does. She cried when she found out about your visit this weekend. Asked why I was choosing you over my own son. Patricia's mouth tightened. I told her I'm choosing what's right for the children. Derek he won't even mention your name. Pretends you don't exist. And their bankruptcy finalized last month. Credit ruined for years. They can't get approved for anything. Apartments, car loans, nothing. They're completely dependent on me now, which Derek resents bitterly. She looked at me. I won't lie, Linda. Having them in my home is exhausting. But the alternative is Emma and Jackson on the streets, and I won't allow that. I felt a strange mix of emotions. Not satisfaction at their suffering that felt too cruel, but a quiet sense of justice. They'd wanted to keep my money while erasing me from their lives. Now they had neither money nor independence, while I'd rebuilt connection with the grandchildren through someone who respected boundaries. Back home in Arizona, I enrolled in a pottery class I'd been eyeing for years. Terrible at it, but it made me laugh. Started volunteering at a literacy program teaching adults to read. Adopted a rescue dog, a gentle golden retriever mix named Sunny, who followed me everywhere and slept at the foot of my bed. Margaret called in June with news that made me set down my coffee. Sarah filed for divorce. She filed last week. Irreconcilable differences. Seeking full custody. Derek's apparently blindsided. His mother called me. Wanted you to know in case it affects the grandchildren's situation. It did affect things, but not how I'd feared. The divorce was ugly and public. Derek contested everything. Custody asset division, what few assets remained, even Patricia's right to facilitate my visits with Emma and Jackson. The judge was unimpressed with his arguments, especially when Sarah's attorney presented evidence of Derek's verbal abuse, his unemployment, his refusal to contribute to household expenses, while living rentrée in his mother's home. By August, Sarah had full custody. Derek had supervised visitation every other weekend, and Sarah, freed from Derek's influence, reached out to Patricia with a message. Tell my mother I'm not ready to talk, but tell her. Tell her she was right about everything. I didn't respond through Patricia. Sarah needed time, and so did I. Maybe someday we'd rebuild something. Maybe not. But I had Emma and Jackson. I had my own life back. And I had learned the most valuable lesson of all. Love without boundaries isn't love. It's exploitation with a prettier name. Meanwhile, Derek had moved into a studio apartment funded by court-ordered support payments he resented paying. His social media, which I checked exactly once at Janet's insistence, showed a bitter man posting vague complaints about family betrayal and women who turn on you. Their empire of entitlement had collapsed entirely. Mine was just beginning to bloom. Here's what I learned. Generosity without respect becomes servitude. Supporting family doesn't mean funding their dysfunction. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no. I didn't lose a daughter by stopping the payments. I'd already lost her the moment she chose my money over my presence. I just finally accepted what was already true. To anyone listening who feels trapped in a similar situation, being used by family afraid to set boundaries because you might lose them, ask yourself, do you really have them now? Or do you just have access to people who tolerate you for what you provide? Setting boundaries cost me temporary pain but earned me permanent peace. My grandchildren are back in my life. My bank account is my own. My home is mine. My future is mine. Would you have done the same? Could you cut off your own child to save yourself? It's the hardest question I've ever faced, and I still wonder sometimes if I made the right choice. But then Emma calls me on Saturday mornings and Jackson sends me crayon drawings. And I look at my life full of friends, hobbies, peace. And I know I didn't lose anything real. I just stopped pretending exploitation was love. What would you do? Thank you for listening to my story.